The parable of the sower is one of the most well-known parables Jesus ever told. Most people hear it as a story about what kind of Christian you are. Which soil are you? Are you the good soil or one of the bad ones? And that reading is not wrong, but I think it stops far too short of what Jesus was actually doing in this parable. Because here is what I noticed. Jesus does not just tell us about soil types, he explains exactly what each soil means. And when you look at his explanation closely, what he is describing is not just a spiritual condition, he is describing the internal environment of a mind. The hardened path, the shallow rocky ground, the thorns that choke everything out, the good and ready soil. Each of these is a picture of a specific way a human mind receives or fails to receive what is being planted in it. And when you see it that way, this parable stops being something you read once and file away. It becomes one of the most practically relevant things Jesus ever said about how our inner life actually works. Let me walk through the parable first so we are all starting from the same place. A sower goes out to scatter seed, and as he scatters, the seed falls on 4 different kinds of ground. Some falls on the path, the hard, well-traveled ground beside the field, where the soil has been compacted by constant foot traffic. Birds come and eat it immediately before it can take root at all. Some falls on rocky ground, a thin layer of soil over a shelf of rock underneath. Seeds spring up fast and with great energy, but when the sun beats down, they wither because there is no depth of root to draw from. Some falls among thorns, seeds that actually do take hold in the soil, but eventually get choked out by thorns growing up alongside them, competing for the same light and space until the plant cannot survive. And some falls on good soil, receiving deep, prepared ground, and produces a harvest 30 times, 60 times, 100 times what was sown. Now here is the thing that makes this parable different from most of Jesus' parables. He actually explains it in detail, which is unusual, and the explanation he gives is the key to everything I want to show you today. Let us start with the path. Matthew 13:19 says, "When anyone hears the message about the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches away what was sown in their heart." The path is hard because it has been walked on so many times that nothing can penetrate it anymore. And I want you to think about what creates that hardness. It is not neglect, it is overuse. The path is hard because too many things have passed over it for too long. We live in a world that produces path-hardened minds at an extraordinary rate. We are exposed to so much information, so much content, so many opinions, so many voices competing for our attention every single day, that the mind develops a kind of protective crust, a numbness, a capacity to hear something and simply not let it land. Not because we are bad people, but because the sheer volume of input has compacted the surface until almost nothing gets through anymore. The hardened path is not angry at the seed. It is not hostile to it. It has simply become a place where things do not penetrate, where words bounce off rather than sink in, because the mind has been trained by volume and velocity to process without absorbing. And the birds come quickly. In Jesus' explanation, the evil one snatches what was sown, but the hardened surface is what made the snatching possible. What has no root has no resistance. The mind that does not let anything sink in cannot hold on to anything either. The rocky ground is the one I find myself thinking about most honestly and most personally, because the rocky ground is not unresponsive. That is what makes it different from the path. The rocky ground receives the seed with immediate enthusiasm. It springs up fast, it looks alive and full of energy from the outside. But the energy is all on the surface. Underneath the thin layer of soil there is rock, and rock cannot be rooted through. So when the sun comes, when pressure arrives, when difficulty shows up, when the initial excitement fades, there is nothing beneath the response to sustain it. Matthew 13:21 says, "Since they have no root, they last only a short time. When trouble or persecution comes because of the word, they quickly fall away." The falling away is not because the seed was bad. The seed was the same seed that produced 100-fold in good soil. The falling away is because there was no depth beneath the initial response to sustain what began so promisingly. I think about the way we engage with powerful ideas today. The conference message that moves us to tears and changes nothing by Tuesday. The sermon we share online because it hit us deeply and then quietly forget by the following week. The book that we finish with genuine excitement and then never open again. That is not always hypocrisy. Sometimes it is rocky ground, an emotional response with no root system underneath it, a real reaction to a real seed, but without the depth of soil required to turn that reaction into something lasting. Depth is not something that happens automatically. It is cultivated. It is the result of slow, quiet, patient engagement with things that matter, engagement that goes below the emotional surface into something more durable. And building that depth requires doing something our current world makes extremely difficult, slowing down enough to let things go deep, rather than moving on to the next thing before the roots have time to form. The thorny ground is the one I think is most dangerous precisely because it is the hardest to detect, because in thorny ground the seed takes root, something real grows, the word actually penetrates and begins to develop into something, and then slowly, quietly, steadily it gets choked, not by one dramatic event, not by a sudden crisis that pulls everything apart, just by the relentless, low-level competition of too many other things growing in the same space. Matthew 13:22 says, "The worries of this life and the deceitfulness of wealth choke it, making it unfruitful." Notice something important about this soil. The thorns were already there. They were not brought in from outside after the seed was planted. They were already present in the ground. They grew up alongside the seed, competing for the same light and the same space and the same oxygen until the good plant simply could not survive the competition. The worries of this life, the deceitfulness of wealth. These are not dramatic enemies, they are quiet, constant, entirely ordinary competitors for the space inside a human mind that good things need in order to grow and bear fruit. Worry does not announce itself as the thing that is choking your faith. It just fills the available space. It crowds the quiet. It takes up the margin. And one morning you wake up and realize that the thing you were growing, the conviction, the peace, the calling, the word that had taken root, has been slowly crowded out not by crisis, but by clutter. Now let us look at the good soil, because I think we often read it as simply the absence of the problems the other soils have, not hardened, not shallow, not cluttered, and that is partly true. But prepared soil is not just soil that avoided the wrong things. Prepared soil is soil that has been actively worked, turned over, broken up, cleared of competing growth, made ready to receive something before the seed ever arrives. Matthew 13:23 says, "But the seed falling on good soil refers to someone who hears the word and understands it. This is the one who produces a crop, yielding 100, 60, or 30 times what was sown." The defining word in Jesus' description of good soil is understands. Not just hears and understands. Understanding requires a certain quality of attention that has become genuinely rare. Not the passive reception of information, but the active, engaged, patient processing of something until it actually means something to you, until it connects to something deeper than the surface of the mind, until the word becomes part of how you actually see and live, not just part of what you know in theory. Good soil is a mind that has been prepared for depth, a mind that has enough quiet to let things land, enough margin to process what arrives, enough freedom from competing noise, that a seed has room to go deep before anything comes to snatch it or crowd it or burn it off in the heat of a difficult season. And here is what gives me genuine hope in this parable. Soil is not permanent. Soil can be prepared. Soil can be worked. The path can be broken up. The rocks can be removed. The thorns can be cleared. None of the first three soil types are destiny. They are descriptions of a current condition that is changeable. The parable is not telling us which type we are forever. It is showing us what the internal environment of our minds currently looks like and inviting us to work the ground. The most important thing I take from this parable is the one I want to leave you with today. The soil is not fixed. It is not destiny. It is a current condition, and conditions can be changed. The work of cultivating good soil, of quieting the pace, building real depth, clearing the competing growth, is real work. But it is the most important work a person can do, because everything that was ever meant to grow in you depends on the ground it has to grow in.